My name is Bruce. I'm one of the co-hosts, I guess, today of this forum, along with Nathan. And I want to welcome you all to this the Zoom meeting, really important Zoom meeting. And we're so happy to have organization Hand in Hand, which I'm not familiar with, but I'm learning about. And I'm learning more about the whole issue that Hand in Hand is dealing with. And it's so important and such a vital part of our society, especially now, and comes to the fore during this period of the pandemic and all that. So Hand in Hand brings together employers and allies of domestic workers, nannies, house cleaners, and home care attendants to act in solidarity with worker-led campaigns and share resources about fair employment. And today we're privileged to have two members of Hand in Hand who are going to be talking to us. The first one is, I'm not sure which order they're going to speak, but Nancy. Okay, Nancy's going to be first. Nancy's a former park naturalist who enjoys spending time outdoors and caring for her 91-year-old mother and 89-year-old aunt. She has experienced the difficulty of navigating the health system and believes that supporting fair pay and working conditions for domestic workers will help all of us age with dignity. And our other presenter is Maria Guyen. And Maria is a longtime labor and community activist, retired SEIU 1021 member, a former employee of San Francisco Department of Disability and Aging, has served on the board of directors for the Senior and Disability Action, Causa Justa, which is Just Cause, and the Mission Neighborhood Center. She's a member of Hand in Hand, Domestic Employer Network, and an ally of the domestic worker movement for many years. So, and also she works with SF Jobs with Justice. So thank you for you presenters for being here. Vanessa is also here. Vanessa is from the California Education Organizers. She's a California Education Organizer with Hand in Hand, and she's going to be helping out with some of the logistics of the presentation. So we're going to have the presentation first from Nancy and Maria, and after that there's going to be some polls that you're going to be asked to participate in, and after the presentation we'll have Q&A. You can, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat while we're going here, or you can wait to the end and ask your questions personally afterwards. But it's easier if you throw the stuff in the chat. So I think at that, this meeting is going to be recorded. And is there any objections to that, of recording this? Okay. The meeting, it will be recorded and it'll be available at the Unitarian. We have a forum account on YouTube, and the recording will be available there. Anybody who wants a copy of that recording, if they want a copy of the link to it, can email forum@uusf.org, and we'll be happy to send you a link. And I think that pretty much covers it at this point. I think I'm going to turn this over to Nancy.
Actually,
Maria.
Yeah, I think I'll start.
Maria's going to start. Okay, great. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you so very much for having us here today. I really appreciate you taking your time to learn more about our organization, and I will share a little bit more. I know Bruce, gave you a little overview of Hand in Hand, but I just want to let you know that Hand in Hand is in fact the Domestic Employers Network, which is a national network. And we are fortunate to have a local chapter here in California of domestic employers that would include seniors and people with disabilities who employ home attendants, as well as parents who employ nannies, and then households who employ house cleaners. And actually, one of those employers myself. So it's important to stress that we share the belief that dignified working conditions for domestic workers benefit not only the worker, but the employer as well. So Hand in Hand works in partnership with the National Domestic Worker Alliance and also the California Domestic Worker Coalition. And we do this work to raise standards in the domestic work industry and to better support the needs of workers and employers and to end unfortunately, the devaluation of domestic work. So for our next slide, what we'd like to do is, and we want to emphasize that we consider our homes as workplaces. So you'll get a lot of information about how we um, support that and why it's also necessary to lift that concept. So our next slide it will take a little time to review the goals for today's session, our webinar, and they're pretty well laid out here. One of them is we'd like to connect with one another around our experiences of care. This is a very important topic, and I'm sure that that prompted you to this session today. So we'll hopefully do that. We also want to share what is facing domestic workers in our community now. As I mentioned before, this work has been um, devalued, and there are lots of barriers and exclusions that they currently face. So we'll also be discussing solidarity and specific ways that we can actually show up for San Francisco domestic workers. And hopefully we leave with a commitment to take an action of solidarity in our homes and our communities and neighborhoods. So those are our goals for today. I also like to cover a few logistics before we continue. And one of them is in regards to accessing closed captioning. We aren't able to provide that today, but that is something that the church is hoping to do later on. But in the meantime, should you need this form of access, we are willing to send you the outline of our script if you put your email address in the chat. And also, to have a smooth meeting, we're asking everyone to stay on mute unless you are speaking. And we're also planning to take and have a Q&A session at the end. So if you could maybe list your questions in chat, Vanessa will help us, and so will Bruce, collect the questions, and we will make sure that you get your questions responded to. Also, if we need to, we can use the raise hand option or stack within chat, or we can actually come off mute and say stack if you want to have make a question or a comment. And we're hoping that we can complete this workshop in an hour, but I understand that we do have a little bit of leeway. So we'll play it by ear, right? And because we aren't able to schedule any breaks today, just know, that, you should take care of yourself as needed. So, with that, I can move on to the other slide. So here's an opportunity that we're gonna create for ourselves, and this section has to do with the concept of how acting in solidarity and creating sanctuary is in fact a form of care. So we all have different experiences with care. So we're hoping that we could take a moment to think of a time when you were cared for, or perhaps you provided care for someone else, or have been in a relationship of mutual support. And we all know that recently with COVID, um, this time has actually provided ample opportunities, right, in this regard. So um, although we, many of us would agree that we live interdependent lives, what's not so comforting is that our country's narrative has been built on false concepts of independence and color blind meritocracy. So what we hope to do now is to break out into pairs for a few minutes. So there's kind of as an icebreaker exercise. And what we'd like to do is share with one another some of our experiences with care and solidarity. So the breakout the breakouts in pairs will take around 5 minutes, and we're hoping to give you clues as to when you can make sure that the second person actually gets a full chance to share their story. So what we hope is that you'll actually tell us a little bit about whether you are a current employer or have been, or perhaps you can just share your own particular care story. It's a care story we feel is telling us about a time when you provided care or support to a loved one, or sought professional care, or about a time when someone cared for you or a loved one that actually made a big difference in your life, or perhaps there was a challenge. Um, and if you can't think of any of those, we invite you to consider, what does sanctuary or providing sanctuary mean to you? Well, it's good to see everyone back. As I mentioned earlier, it seems that we got a little extra time, but I hope it went to good use. And um, so we're gonna actually now hope that we could encourage you to perhaps in chat share your intro, your name, your preferred pronoun, and one value or feeling that you can use to describe an experience of care or solidarity. So just coming out of your small group, is there a way that you can share something like that with all of us in the chat? We don't have time to do a whole go around, but if we can do that, and also if there are a couple of people that are able to maybe share to the larger group, what are some of the values or shared experiences of care and solidarity that you heard within your pair groups? Anybody willing to
I'll
share?
go, Maria.
Thank you, Nikki.
Okay. Hi, everybody. And thank you so much, Bruce and Maria, Vanessa, for doing this. So I met with Millie, and Millie described something that I've heard other people of same-minded people talk about, which is what do you do when you're in labor, when you're involved with social justice, when you're a labor organizer yourself, and always advocating for individuals and groups, and now it's your turn to hire somebody in your home.
Mhm.
And you want to make sure you're doing the right thing, because here you are, you've been living the life, but now it's really coming at you,
Yeah.
and we're not sure exactly how we're supposed to behave, and
Mhm.
and some people are just really reluctant to do it. I've heard this from a few people that they say, I can't do that, I can't hire somebody to have them doing this work for me. So that's a kind of a conflict that some people have. And the
Yeah.
other conflict that we have is the debate between agency versus hiring somebody privately,
Okay.
and that's a big one for people.
Good. Well, that is those are good points, And yeah, I also wanted to shout out and thank Millie for helping us get here today too with this particular webinar. Again, we have labor connections, and I see some other fellow Labor Council delegates here, and Alan's shaking his head when you were posing that particular issue, Nikki, and it's true. And that's one of the reasons why when I became acquainted with Hand in Hand, I was like really thrilled, right? Because it was one thing to be in solidarity because of my union background with the domestic worker movement, but then it was something else. I could actually do more understanding my role as an employer, and then Hand in Hand helping me to do that better. So we'll get more into that. In fact, Nancy is going to lead us in our next session. So, but before we do that, is anybody else interested in sharing anything from their group? Michael, hi, Michael, actual member of Hand in Hand himself. Michael Lyon.
Hi, I spoke with a person who has a condition that means that she would really have to stay at home to age, and really doesn't have the option of being able to go into another place to age just because of her condition. And so, and she had taken care of her father for a while, and knew what that was like. And so there's all kinds of situations about respite, being able to get respite, and just being able to have aging at home be a workable alternative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, again, thank you for sharing. Yes, Merle?
Yeah, I am that person. And I was talking with Michael about what I had learned in involving the hiring an agency and hiring yourself. And also I worked for Alameda County, where they sent out RN nurses into the community to assess what the conditions might be.
Mm-hmm.
Home care nurses, I believe they're called, but I couldn't remember exactly. And Michael is dealing with maybe needing to hire somebody to his home. So.
Right. Oh, good. Well, thanks for sharing that, Merle. And like I said, I hope that we'll get more into some of this content as I hand over the baton to Nancy. Oh, Vanessa, yes.
Yeah, I believe Alan has his hand raised.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh,
Well,
I'm sorry, I can see that.
No problem. I just wanted to say, although we've hardly ever hired somebody to clean the house, we've hired people to do yard work and to, do painting and fix things. And so some of the things we're talking about apply to these people as well.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm here to listen and learn and apply it however it takes shape in my life in the future.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Alan. Yes, very good point. And we do actually, consider all of this under domestic worker work. So, all right. So with that, any others, or can we? Oh, yes, Bruce. You're muted.
Yeah, there we go. No, something just occurred to me, and that is that when Alan was talking, because in our house too, we've been fortunate to know a family. One of the husband in this case is an incredible carpenter and plumber, and just all kinds of work. In fact, I think this house would have fallen down if this person wasn't around. And we've had so many problems, but what does Hand in Hand say in terms of things like Social Security? And because to be honest with you, we pay in cash, okay? And I think he's happy to be paid in cash. He doesn't have to pay taxes, but but he's, on the other hand, he's not going to collect Social Security and that sort of thing. So what do you say about that kind of issue?
Okay, well, that's a really good question. And we actually in the presentation cover some of the legal requirements.
Okay.
And so we'll cover some of that. And again, if in fact your exact, question isn't responded to, we also have information sheets that we're going to be sending out to folks after the workshop. But that is a dilemma that, that we're faced with regards to the status of employment, the citizenship status of some of the workers. But again, what we want to be able to do is work as closely as possible in solidarity and making sure that we provide safe sanctuary, right, for folks. So, but again, people want to, employers, do need to know what is required or how we can approach this responsibly. So thank you for the question. Okay, well, yes, Doug. Are you sharing from the small groups, or are we doing questions now? Because what we were hoping was that we would take questions later on. But if you're sharing from the small group, please, Doug, contribute. Hello?
Doug?
Oh, I didn't understand my name.
Oh, yes.
The question that arose in my mind as we were talking was, how do we define these domestic workers? I mean, we've got people who clean houses, we've got people who are home health care workers, we've got others, but we also have the electricians and plumbers and
right.
contractors who have been absolutely essential to us. And so I have no idea where the border, whether these are all the same category of worker or not.
Okay. Actually, in regards to tradespeople that come into your home, like plumbers, electricians, oftentimes these particular workers, not always, but they're unionized, or they have organized organization. I mean, they're organized workers. And so what we're hoping is that, well, what we're trying to do here is actually focus on nannies and house cleaners and home attendants, right? So people that are working in our homes that are not necessarily in an organized, well, they are organized, but through community groups that and this particular movement. So it's a little bit different than what we're talking about. That okay, so yeah. All right. And I'm, without seeing any other hands, I think what we can, and thank you for those that have contributed in the chat. Is it, yeah, it's time to pass on to Nancy. Nancy, are you prepared to
Yeah, hey.
continue? Great, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm Nancy, and for those who jumped on a little later, I'm a volunteer with Hand in Hand just since last July. And what I really appreciate about the organization is that it is led by, people that are involved in, they're either, they hire care or they are caregivers. And so the breakout room, I always find so enriching because there's so many common threads that come out of it. The value of community, the desire to not exploit somebody. I mean, these are such important issues to grapple with. And so I just know that sort of, these sort of questions often drive our actions, right? We want to be, and then we want to become informed. So I know we have some details up on the screen right now, but I was just going to ask you briefly to close your eyes or turn your face away from the screen. Just take a deep breath, because we're going to dive in deep on some details, and I just want you to be resourced for that. It can be overwhelming for some people, so here we go. You can open your eyes. And yeah, the facts of the matter. Here's some facts about the domestic workers. So there are over 10,000 domestic workers in San Francisco. As you can see, the majority are immigrant workers. And domestic workers, and we're talking, as Marie said, focusing on nannies, home health aides, and house cleaners. These people are legally excluded right now from the right to collective bargaining and to form a union. And this is limited by the National Labor Relations Act. So this means they cannot collectively negotiate with their employers to improve their pay, their benefits, or their working conditions. They are also denied many basic labor rights, such as protections for safety and health under Cal OSHA, and that's just Cal OSHA law. And so number 3, a 2020 study by Rutgers University, and it was a study of low-wage workers in San Francisco, found that about half of all workers in private homes, so again, we're talking cleaners, nannies, cooks, and healthcare aides, experienced wage violations, such as underpayment, or not paying overtime, or not paying required or providing required breaks. But of this 50%, fewer than 1% filed complaints. And from what workers tell us, the low reporting is due to fear of retaliation or of losing one's job. So we'll talk about the important communication piece in a bit. A number 4 item is 70% of domestic workers don't earn enough to meet their basic living expenses. And lastly, domestic workers are entitled to pay time off like any other employees, but 87% of them never receive this benefit. Next slide. So there are these principles of solidarity, and I just briefly looked up the word solidarity, which means in unity. And I was a Unitarian Universalist for a short time in Salt Lake City, and just really appreciate how social justice is woven into the fabric of UU. And I can see that SFUU has a social justice committee. And so these principles of solidarity are principles you live with and practice. And so that makes you a really important ally in solidarity. So, I mean, you can see what it says on the screen here. The principles of solidarity then are, we show and live solidarity in everyday life, meaning we question things and strive for best practices. We educate and prepare ourselves. You're doing that today. We organize our own people. And I know that you're recording this so people can watch this later, which is fantastic. We show up when called in. We follow the lead of frontline communities. And that's what I love about Hand in Hand. They follow the lead of frontline people. And our own home is a fair and caring workplace. Maria, tell us about the levels of action.
Okay, so thanks for that, Nancy. Before I do, I just have add my little, my own little comment about solidarity. Within the labor movement, I have some labor siblings that and kind of came up with this particular quote a few years ago, and it was, "Solidarity is the new I love you." I always thought that was really great, and especially when a good friend of mine actually cross-stitched that particular saying, and I love it. I wish I had the slide I could share it with you. Anyway, but the 3 action levels that Hand in Hand, reminds us of and work with are that they start with in our own homes, right? And we want to know, like, how is it that we can support and be an ally with the people that we live with or who work in our homes. So again, back to our home is a workplace, and so whether we have a nanny, a domestic worker, home attendant, or even the occasional UVerse person or Comcast worker that comes into our homes. You know, we want to show that we are supportive of workers and understand how we are in mutual support. Also in regards to our neighborhoods, right? So how do we support and ally with the people in our neighborhoods? You know, whether it's you know, building a community garden together, or even just sharing resources. Recently, a neighbor shared with me some information from San Mateo County, where I live, on where to go for COVID vaccines. And fortunately, I had already had that covered, but they wanted to make sure that as a neighbor that they were sharing that information, or is it you know, just having friendly, you know, banter or relationships with our neighbors, and building that. And then thirdly, it's within our communities, right? How do we organize with or support organizing being led by our immigrant siblings? So again, Bruce and I talked a little bit in our small group about groups like La Colectiva or Mujeres Unidas y Activas, which are also groups within the California Domestic Worker Coalition. And so hand in hand finds or considers ourselves an ally to these workers, and we like to be well, we're actually led by these workers in regards to their movement. So we want to know, like, how are we organizing ourselves and our people, and getting, you know, whether it's, you know, getting involved in forums like this, whether it's, you know, helping with the mutual aid, or recently there was also a DocuFund that was set up to help immigrant workers that were not receiving other benefits or stimulus checks and so forth. So, so those are the 3 ways that we focus on in regards to actions of solidarity that we can take on an interpersonal level. And then also we want to be able to share next some specific community-wide campaigns where we can win rights for domestic workers in San Francisco.
Next slide, please. So a number of you have asked, what does fair employment look like? So I'm just going to give the overview, and then Maria will give some detailed answers about this. But you know, to make your home safe and supportive and to be a fair domestic employee, these are 3 easy to remember principles that we emphasize. Clear expectations so that both the worker and the employer can know what to expect, and this can be renegotiated over time. The second is fair pay, which looks like a living wage if an employer can afford to pay it. So that again is probably part of clear expectations. And we will talk later about what fair pay is for our area in the Bay Area. And reliable pay, so that when employer or employee goes on, employer goes on vacation, the employee is not left just hanging. And the last is paid time off, which includes federal holidays and paid vacation and paid sick time. So I'm looking forward to Maria's giving us details on these 3.
Okay, thanks, Nancy. So in regards to clear expectations, we really can't stress enough the importance, right, of having you know, clear expectation from even starting at the actual hiring process. And One of the things that I thought was really helpful is Hand in Hand has actually put together um, some some tips and some suggestions from employers that um, thought, oh, if only I would have asked this, or this is what would have been important to have asked during the interview. So we have some information like that, but it's also how to say, this is also something that we're going to be making available to you after the workshop. There's a sheet that's actually called a tip sheet from employers to employers. So again, it's only fair that we you know, have as in tip number 2, we put together a work agreement um, for the now, and then also remember to update it as the work changes. So I like to say that I knew my home was a workplace when I handed my house cleaner a set of keys, and we worked together on a work agreement. And it's made it really you know, easy, and also something that has helped us develop you know, trust with each other. The third tip is talk talk early and often. Excuse me, let me go back a little bit. I'm so sorry. So some of the things that you would like to include in the agreement, right, is the issue of what the work schedule will be like, what will be the pay, benefits, and also actual work responsibilities, and things like what to do in case of an emergency. So I know one time I had a call from my house cleaner. I was out of the home, and she called and she was very concerned, and I got worried, but she says, I just want to let you know that I broke this particular, you know, object, you know, and the first thing I said was, well, are you okay, right? And she said, yeah, no, I'm okay. And I said, okay, well then that's all I care about. But I thought to myself, you know, it's true. I mean, she's in my home. You know, something happens. You know, I need to be able to, you know, to know what to do in that case. Also, let's see. Oh, and again, we have sample work agreements that we're also able to share with you. So if in fact this is something that, you know, where you are an employer now and you haven't necessarily you know, put something like this together, we would be able to send you a template in an email after. And especially if you're able to fill out our evaluation and let us know that this is something you're interested in. Okay, third tip, talk early and often. So as we know, communication isn't just a one-time thing. We want to make sure that we create opportunities for regular conversation and check-ins from the beginning. I know I had talked with Nikki a couple of days ago, and one of the things we talked about is how you know, sometimes it's not always easy, especially if some of us you know, are not necessarily bilingual, but we were talking about, you know, how we can try to help each other out in regards to this particular issue and communicating with our workers. So that's something we'll do some more work on. And then it would what this allows also is for not only us to give feedback, which is fair to the worker, but also to get feedback back from our particular worker as well. And one of the conversations I remember having with my house cleaner was how to actually convert over to making sure that we were using non-toxic cleaning supplies. And so, you know, it was, yeah, it was a really good opportunity to kind of talk about what that meant for both myself as an elder and her as the worker, right, doing this work and being exposed to harsh chemicals and so forth. So there's that tip. There's also number 4 is if in fact you are thinking of changing the job, you know, then the work agreement also needs to change in correlation with that. So it's all again about being fair with the expectations and if there is some flexibility that's needed on both ends, right? Then that's an opportunity, to do that. So, yeah, those are some of the tips that we have, and like I said, we're gonna also augment with some actual tip sheets and supportive documents. So, back to you, Nancy.
Thanks. Yeah, and I've been seeing people's questions in the chat. So Doug and Miller and Nikki, just to know that we'll definitely get to your questions at the end. We have time for that, so not losing track. Just to give a little detail on what is a living wage, and this is talking about the Bay Area, and I know you guys are, some of you are from Auburn, so perhaps Maria, you could weigh in on this later, but pay a living wage, what does that mean? Well, we recommend that employers pay at least $18 an hour take-home pay, and that the pay increases with responsibilities. So if you have 2 children or 3 children for nannies instead of 1, or if you add housekeeping duties. So for example, a recommended pay for a nanny share would actually start at $21. So that's for 2 families sharing a nanny. The pay in general, though, should be a living wage. So you can take a look at the data for your area, but just so that the provider can support their own family. And tip number 2, pay for overtime. California law now requires, and I'm going to talk about childcare here for a second. If you have a non-live-in childcare provider, meaning they're not in your home, you need to pay overtime, and that's 1.5 times the hourly wage for any time worked after 9 hours in a day. And federal overtime law requires a non-live-in nanny to get paid overtime after 40 hours in a week, considering a week to be 7 days. So regardless, just coming from a space of wanting to support people, we recommend that employers pay overtime for any time worked after 8 hours in a day or 40 hours in a week. And lastly, pay reliability. So employment with your home worker, you're just trying to guarantee a minimum take-home pay each week. And I realized one of the questions was, what if it's a very occasional hire? We're talking here about you have an agreement where somebody's coming in on a regular basis. So that's the framework for here. But especially during, this came up in the start of COVID, like, well, many of our employers signed a fair pay agreement just out of, right thing to do, that paid their workers even if they couldn't come. If for some reason they had COVID or they had to watch kids at home, and so that's part of what we're talking about with the minimum take home pay. So in general, it just means paying also on days where you have to cancel at the last minute. So your child is ill, if we're using a nanny example, or you suddenly are going to take a day to go to the, I don't know what, you're not going to be home and you don't need your worker. That those last minute occasions, you would take the pay and provide it to your home care worker. So yeah, Maria, paid time off.
Yes. So this is this is something we all have needed and taken advantage of if we need to take care of ourselves or our families. And so domestic workers actually need this as well, right? So we'll talk more about a particular program that will help make this easier for domestic workers. But another so we're talking about actually providing paid sick days, and also making sure again with the hours that the person works to accommodate for meal and rest breaks as well. Also providing paid vacation days of the workers choosing is also important. I know oftentimes my house cleaner looks for some time off, especially if in fact her child is not in school and so forth. A recommended amount is usually 1 hour earned for every 30 hours worked. And for sick days, it's full-time employees. It would be 5 days of paid sick time per year. And also for part-time workers, it's 1 hour earned for every 30 hours worked. So we also encourage that workers are given these considerations and benefits as well. So moving on to some of the legal requirements, which is not necessarily my strong suit, but I will plug away here with what the information that we provide. And it is true that that we are covered by some of the fair employment practices, and we wanted to let you know some of the bare minimum requirements for domestic workers, which would include state and federal taxes. But then again, this comes back to the question that Bruce posed earlier, right? As well, what if that isn't necessarily the case? We're actually paying, cash wages to folks and not really doing this reporting. But again, we're also bound by minimum wage ordinance, and of course, minimum is again minimum, and what we do encourage folks to be high road employers, and I believe Vanessa mentioned in the chat that that we will be able to send more resources on the legal requirements and everything else after the presentation. So again, if you have your email, if you're able to list your email, we can get you more of this information. So, we just want to share that domestic workers are in fact considered employees and not independent contractors. We've all heard of, a lot of the controversy right now of gig workers, and large corporations are trying to state that their employees are not their responsibility, or their employees, but more contractors, independent contractors. But for the state law, this is, in San Francisco law also, domestic workers are considered employees. And so I think the most significant requirements include at the federal level that when an employee is paid more than $2,200 in a calendar year, that you're required to withhold and pay Social Security and Medicare, which is at the rate of 12.4% and 9.2% respectively. And it's split evenly, supposedly, between the employer and the employee. And again, there's the actual wage. Let's see, the wage thresholds are. Sorry, I explained to you before. This isn't like necessarily my strong suit. Well, like I said, we're going to be providing more detailed information about this. I think what we hope to date was to kind of impress that as an employer, we do have responsibilities beyond just paying wages to these workers, and so and one thing important to remember is that there is protection against retaliation for workers to assert their rights, and that is an important message that we'd like to send you. So okay, so again, I'm going to move over and pass it on over to Nancy now.
Yeah. So I'm realizing that time is passing. So I think after a year and a month of COVID, or a year and a few weeks of COVID, we have, I hope many of us have an understanding of what COVID safety guidance is. So I'm not going to spend much time on this slide. Just if you are confused about it, perhaps go online and research it, but just really protect, your home care help as if they're family, and, especially if they're doing personal care work, they have to move in right next to somebody. So just making it possible for them to do that as quickly as possible and then move out of that 6 foot out to a 6 foot space again. Yeah, so just, remember to treat the home care worker with care around COVID. Marie, back to you for.
Well, thank you. So here are some ways that that you can support domestic workers and also join hand in hand as we try to lift the standards, industry standards for domestic workers. So there's 2 campaigns that I'd like to briefly tell you about. And one of them is that there's a San Francisco paid time off campaign. And this is where domestic workers are here in San Francisco trying to create a program to help all domestic workers access paid time off so that they can take care of themselves or their family members. So as it stands right now, domestic workers are entitled to they're covered under the existing paid sick leave ordinance. However, there's no mechanism for them to take advantage of that because they actually are employed by multiple employers. So this particular legislation, this ordinance is being sponsored by Supervisor Hillary Ronan, and the campaign actually we're very excited. We'll be starting this month. So that's something to look out for, and would be great to have your support on. So the next one is the Health and Safety Protections Ordinance campaign, and this is something that has been introduced already by legislation that's been introduced at the California legislature by Senator Maria Elena Durazo, and it's SB 321. And basically what it'll do is it'll end the exclusion of domestic workers from California health and safety protections. Right now, Cal OSHA protections and regulations do not cover domestic workers. They are excluded, and we really and we understand that this is all based on historic racism in our country. So we want to make sure that we can work to get the exclusion removed. And so this is a statewide campaign that again will bring you more information about later on. So those are two exciting campaigns that Hand in Hand is again working on in conjunction with the Domestic Worker Coalition, California Domestic Worker Coalition.
Thanks, Maria.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Nathan, I have a question for you. We were considering doing another quick breakout room. And Vanessa, you can put the slide forward. Do you think that's possible, Nathan, or should we just tackle this in the large group?
We can do another breakout room.
With the time in mind, probably just 4 minutes is fine. And so what we're going to do is pair share again and reflect back on our experiences, and then reflect on the presentation and the vast experience that Marie brought to the table with her detailed discussion of, what's fair, and just what, talk a little bit about what feels possible and exciting, or what do you feel uncertain about? What questions do you still have? What more do you want to learn? And then what action do you want to take or might you take, and what support would you need for this? So we're going to put you in pairs for 4 minutes, and we'll see you back here at 2:16. also wanted to make sure we get the poll up. So Nathan, is that something that we could do right now?
Yeah, so the poll is up.
Great.
Popped up on everyone's screen.
So this is a cool feature of Zoom, and you can just, it has an action question, and you're able to choose multiple items. So just take a moment to look at those questions and then choose the ones that are meaningful for you. And then Nathan, are you able to see when most of the polls, when the poll is closed? I guess we'll give you a minute here.
Yes, I can. So
Okay.
once people submit it, it'll pop up.
Cool.
Look what I'm making for dinner, everybody.
So Nancy, Millie actually asked something in the chat about whether or not, if you're not currently employing somebody, should you answer the poll anyway?
Oh, thank you. Yes, just to the best of your ability. I know in my breakout group, we were talking about, you know, you might not be involved in this at this time, but it's funny how quickly something can change, you know, take a fall and you suddenly need a home health aide or, you know, so yeah. And I think it just helps that mind-body connection. You're actually making choices that, you know, might not need it right now, but just in the future, or maybe you run into somebody you know that you can share with about this. And then, yeah, Vanessa, if you could go to the next slide. All right, Nathan, does it look like we can wrap this up?
You can. I don't have any responses here in the poll yet.
Oh, okay. Well, can we leave it open at the same time I speak?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, well, that's what we'll do. Just in the interest of time. And so just wanted to invite you to our storytelling and organizing fellowship. And I've read with interest that SFUU also has its storytelling coming up in May, I think. But at any rate, you know, I know your focus in April is becoming what we value. That's a focus point. And so part of what I have found valuable in my time with Hand in Hand is it's helped me take my care story about my mom and my aunt and actually make it like I can get to the heart of the story and the overarching theme that really resonates with lawmakers, for instance, with friends, with caregivers. I found it so important. And what I've come up with is we all deserve to age with dignity. And that can be aging, you know, as in aging in place because we're elderly and need help, or people with disabilities who deserve to, you know, have dignity as they age. So we do have a storytelling and organizing fellowship. You see it up here. And so it's a project, and the project manager's name is down at the bottom, her email, and we can share that with you later as well. But it is a way to gather some of the care stories that are so important to share with decision makers. Next slide, please. Oh, we already did that. So the polling, I mean, so I would just say in terms of the storytelling that I want to make sure that you hear this interesting piece. It's a fellowship, so there's actually a stipend. So there's a $250 stipend, and it builds, the fellowship will include a workshop where you learn to storytell about examples of how our long-term care system just is not working for people anymore, and to build a campaign in California to provide universal long-term services and supports. So yeah, definitely take down that email address if you're interested in that. All righty, so yeah, thank you so much for being with us. And I think, Maria, can you put into the chat that there's a interest form for that storytelling, if you are able to? Otherwise, I will in a moment.
Or is this something that Vanessa can help us with? I'm sorry.
Maybe. Yeah, so I wanted to make sure that we had time to answer questions. And so I know Nikki said how to fund or pay sick and vacation when employees only occasional. And hopefully you heard in some of the details Marie shared that just, an hour for every 30 hours of work is a general guideline. So then you would just extrapolate from that. Does that answer your question, Nikki?
And maybe Nancy, I can add that the National Domestic Workers Alliance actually came up with a portable benefits program a couple of years ago, whereby an employer can actually contribute to a particular worker's account and pay towards their sick pay benefits or health care, and we do that on a regular basis. We collect the money for the worker. The worker then can access this these funds when they do need to take a sick day, and they have some compensation there for them during those times. So I just wanted to make aware of that program as well. So, and this is something that hopefully we're going to be instituting with the paid time off ordinance that we talked about earlier. Something similar in San Francisco where we can actually do that, have an account that we can contribute to for the workers.
Cool. And then Miller Phillips, you wrote, I think it was just a comment, fear of exploiting another, and absolutely understand. And that's why the communication piece is so critical. And if you needed help with that communication, finding somebody who speaks the language, and hand in hand could probably help with that. Other organizations, just so that there's a clear understanding of what the expectations are and what the pay is. And then there was a question about legal requirements for temp help, and I think Maria answered some of those. And I can't remember who asked that question. But if you still have it, let us know. And then Doug, you said, is a work agreement a contract? And I could see in the chat that Vanessa had answered, yes, it is. Are there any other questions that folks have? I know we only have 5 minutes left, and just wanted to honor our time frame here.
This is Vanessa, just really quickly. I can share resources that contain all of this information with you. I would just need your emails, and I'm not sure if Bruce, you have them, if you could share them with me, or if you all would send them to me in a private chat. I can also put my email in the chat if you'd like to receive all of this information. So I'll put it here. And if you don't want to email me, that's okay. You could also find this information on our website, which I'll put it again in the chat. There you go. So my email's in there, and as is our website. I know it's a lot of information, and we don't have that much time to go deep into every detail, but we're here to help in any way that we can. And thank you, Nancy and Maria, for presenting to us today.
Great. And then just a quick question. Vanessa is a paid employee with Hand in Hand. So Vanessa, are we doing the link to the Fair Care page and the 2 minutes to sign and share petitions?
Yeah, I will put the link in. I'm going to find it right now and put it in the chat.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for spending this hour and a half with us here on Sunday, and it is Easter Sunday. I just, yeah.
Could I ask a quick question?
Sure, Ron.
You opened the floor to a off-topic question. I think it's kind of on topic. It's a question about. I don't have a domestic here. I have a alcoholic, homeless man and his cousin who live in my garage or carport tool shed, and in exchange for that, totally rent-free, they don't pay anything, they do chores around my house. Is that a contract?
Sounds like it's a verbal contract. It's outside my experience level, and I think I would have to hand that off to Marie or Vanessa, but I would say it sounds like you have a verbal contract.
And a liability, I suppose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a housing issue.
Yeah.
Correct.
I think
I mean, I'm in Texas, so our laws are
Yeah.
different, but similar.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Probably a little bit outside the scope of our focus
Sure.
today, but I totally hear what you're saying.
Yeah, it's good that you're thinking of it. And
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
yeah.
If you want to send me an email, Ron, and I could, to the best of my abilities, help you out with that situation and see what we can figure out in terms of Texas.
Could I
law,
put it
just 'cause
in
I'm
chat?
too
Is that what?
Yeah,
Do you
Yeah, you
have-
could put it in
Great.
chat if you like.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
All right. So if you, I think Vanessa also put in the chat, if you're interested in picking up the links. Oh, I don't see them in there, but
I see
at
that.
any rate, okay. If you're able to use the chat to share a reflection and you're leaving the webinar thinking about something, what is the something that you are feeling or thinking or would have liked more of? And if it's easier just to unmute, we're looking for just a word or two, but you could put it in the chat or just say it out loud. And I see Vanessa did add the links to these Fair Care pledges and actions you can take.
Does anyone know how to save the chat when you're on the phone? Those little dots at the bottom.
Yeah, I've taken a picture of it myself. I'm not actually, I don't know how to do it. So what I've done with mine is I take my phone and take a picture of the link and then use it later.
Oh yeah, I can do like a screenshot.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us. We look forward to collaborating with you. We'll be here for a couple minutes after, our official end. But these are just such an important initiatives that are bringing dignity to the people in our communities. Can't tell you how much we appreciate you spending time sharing this connection with us. So thank you so much.